Hello and welcome to the South Bay Workforce Investment Board. My name is Maria Frias and I work under the Contracts Department, where we are tasked to implement and follow the policy and procedures that govern the operation of the statewide eligible training provider list in California. They address the activities of the governor, local workforce development boards, their America's Job Centers of California locations, and those training providers who wish to offer services to adults, dislocated workers, and out-of-school youth whose training is funded by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. In this presentation, I will introduce you to the Contracts Department team, show you how to access the online application, discuss renewals, explain a straight renewal, describe renewals with different types of changes, go over the enrollment performance matrix form, discuss the cost analysis, give you a renewal overview, describe the contract components, talk about when contracts are executed, and talk about the final steps. The Contracts Department team is made up of a manager who is also the South Bay Workforce Investment Board's ETPL coordinator. Her team is made up of an administrative support staff member and 3 contract analysts. The online application can be accessed either by going to www.sbwib.org under iTrain or directly under wioa.i-train.org. Once on the website, click on Application, click on Our School Would Like to Be Listed on iTrain, and then select the link according to your organization type. When you click on the appropriate link, you will be able to see the application on the website, and the system will allow you to type in information, but will not allow those updates to be saved at the end. This is why it is important to first download the application and save it onto your own drive before filling out. To download it, click on the image as illustrated here. If you hover over the image, it indicates that it is a download feature. In this presentation, we are going to discuss renewals. To start, it is important to understand that all contracts are given a 2-year term. When there are certain types of changes, an amendment is required. Amendments do not affect the 2-year term. However, a renewal is required every 2 years so that we may obtain updated information from the training provider and to give the contract another 2-year term. Two months before the contract expires, training provider will receive an email with the renewal instructions and deadline. Training provider must submit renewal documents on time to keep from being placed on hold. Please note that the application forms, such as Exhibit A and Exhibit B, are not required unless you are specifically making changes to any program. The renewal is simply needed to keep the contract active for another 2 years. The renewal instructions are normally sent to the person listed on the application listed here under Personnel. It is very important to keep this information current with us. Otherwise, if that person is no longer there, this may cause your organization to be placed on hold for non-renewal. However, we do make a few other attempts by calling and sending written correspondence to the training provider before we place anyone on hold. This is the simplest form of renewal. We refer to it as the straight renewal. It is when the training provider does not need to make any changes but renew the contract for another 2-year term. Before we move on to discuss required forms and documents needed for certain changes in addition to renewing the contract, please note that an asterisk will be placed next to a process or item not needed or applicable to training providers that fall under the PTPD directory, which are for public institutions and higher education such as colleges and universities. With the straight renewal, we only need the application form referred to as a training provider information form, with any revisions needed and a signature. This is a 1 or 2 page document depending on the training provider type. These are the other documents we will need, and only if we do not have current ones already on file. If you need to submit your renewal with other updates, here are most possible scenarios. I will discuss them further with their applicable forms and documentation required. When adding a branch or satellite location, when there is an address change, when changing the program price and or hours, when there is a training provider name change, or when adding new programs. If your organization would like to add a branch or satellite location, this is what is needed. Here are the forms that are part of your application that you will need to submit to us with new revisions. It is important that you keep the original application handy because as you make changes down the line, it will facilitate filling out these forms. Also, the ADA compliance survey is not part of the application, but will be given prior to the pre-award site visit to complete. Here are other documents required. Please note that when adding a satellite location, we will not need the Enrollment Performance Matrix, Exhibit B, and iTrain program description forms, but everything else applies. And last but not least, adding a new branch or satellite location requires a pre-award site visit. When there is an address change, that requires an amendment as well. The application form needed is the application, which is a training provider information form with the new address, the ADA compliance survey, which will be given prior to the pre-award site visit to complete and turn in. The other documents needed are those listed. We need them with the new address where applicable. A pre-award site visit is required here as well. When there is a change to an existing program prices and/or program hours, this is the application form needed with the revisions on Exhibit A. The other forms required to make those changes are the BPPE approval for hour changes and the itemized cost breakdown and company letterhead that needs to be signed and dated for program price changes. The only 2 items that do not need to be itemized but listed on this form are the tuition and registration fees. All other costs need to be itemized further in the letter. Whenever there is a training provider name change, we need the application, which is the training provider information form with the name change. Other documents needed with the new name are listed here. For new program additions, here are the application forms required, and here are the other documents needed. Please note that this form or process is not required of public institutions. Something worth mentioning is the Enrollment Performance Matrix form that is required for all new programs. The programs listed here must reflect activity for the past 12 months. You would indicate that time period here. List the programs here along with those enrolled in the program that were WIOA students and those that were non-WIOA students. The total of those 2, how many graduated, how many not yet graduated, and how many students were placed in jobs. If you are requesting approval for more than 1 program, you will list the rest below the computer technician program in the same manner. We require a minimum of 10 graduates with a 70% placement rate. In this scenario, we would divide the total placed by total graduated. In this example, that would be 8 divided by 10, which would equal an 80% placement rate. Anything under 70% would automatically be declined. However, we will still need the supportive placement information requested on the bottom of this page to make the final determination. We need a separate list of those graduates placed in jobs. The list must identify the graduate's name, training program, name of the employer, employer's address, employer's telephone number, the contact person, job title, and starting wage. It may be helpful to include the graduate's phone number as well for the cases where we may not be able to verify employment through the employer. If we cannot verify at least 70% placement rate, we will give you an opportunity to provide third-party employment verifications. Only those programs that meet or exceed the 70% placement rate after verification is conducted by our office will be recommended for approval. A cost analysis is conducted for all new programs and for all existing programs whenever there is a program price and/or hour change. The program's price and hours are compared to other similar approved programs. We review that the program's price and/or training hours do not exceed the market average by more than 15%. One thing to keep in mind is that we do lock program prices for 12 months. However, program price reductions are allowed anytime. This is what our renewal process looks like. After we collect all the required forms, documentation, and everything checks out during our desk review, a recommendation for approval is submitted to the board. If approved, a new agreement is drafted and sent to the training provider for signatures. The contract will be given a new 2-year term. Before we discuss contract components, it is important to understand a contract's lifespan. All contracts are given a 2-year term. Any minor changes within that 2-year term requires an amendment to the contract, and only affected changes are listed in the amendment. Here is an example of what we would require if the contract falls within the 6th Amendment. The contract itself, the application forms depend on the type of changes that are being made as mentioned in earlier slides. For the most part, the forms could possibly be any of the following. These forms are always required with all contracts, amendments, or renewals. Here is an example if the contract renewal now requires a new contract. What we normally do to complete your contract is pull all the previous Exhibit A's, Exhibit B's, Exhibit D, and itemized cost listings that are still applicable from your previous contract and reuse them with the new contract. However, we would need the following forms with updated information and signatures: the bidder information sheet, which is the application, training provider information form, the Exhibit E, statement of business ownership, the vendor authorized signature page, and any other new updates you are making along with current insurance. Our contracts are executed every Wednesday, therefore we must receive all items by noon on Tuesday to execute the contract that week. Here are the final steps. Once the contract is executed, an original is mailed to the training provider and the other original is kept here at South Bay WIB. A copy is also given to the analyst and kept in the training provider's file. And finally, the training provider along with the programs are listed on iTrain, the ETPL, and South Bay WIB's master directory. This concludes the presentation. Thanks for listening.